So with the Superman trailer coming out, it kind of got me thinking, right? With James Gunn using stories like All-Star Superman and Kingdom Come as inspirations for his Superman film, what other stories should DC adapt to the cinematic universe? I'm really excited, man. More than I've ever been excited for a DC film. So these are 5 storylines that I want to see adapted to the DC cinematic universe in some form or fashion. Either movies are influenced by these stories or it's a one-to-one adaptation of the comics to the cinematic universe. So coming in at number 5 is actually 2 stories, and they both involve Wonder Woman from the legendary Greg Rucka run, who's the greatest Wonder Woman writer in the history of DC Comics. Hikatea, or A League of One. Now, the Hikatea was a phenomenal story with Wonder Woman. And this is a story where Wonder Woman's just like chilling at her apartment. This woman just knocks on her door, and when Wonder Woman answers, the first thing this girl says is, "I swear a vow of Hikatea." Now, the way the story explains it is that a vow of Hikatea is basically somebody coming to you and saying, "I need help," right? "I am in a very vulnerable place. I need your assistance." The way the vow works is that as soon as the vow is initiated, the Fates show up, which is a trio of these incredibly powerful witches, powerful enough to kill Wonder Woman, essentially. And what happens is that Wonder Woman has to accept the vow. She cannot reject it. And when she accepts the vow of Hikatea, she has to bring that person, in this case, that woman, into her home. She has to offer her a place to stay. She has to offer her food. She has to treat her as an honored guest. If Wonder Woman doesn't do that, the Fates will kill her. On the other side of the coin, the person who swears the vow cannot abuse it. So they can't stay longer than they need to. They cannot eat Wonder Woman out of house and home, and they cannot abuse her hospitality. If they do, the Fates will kill them. So as Wonder Woman and this woman are spending time together, what Wonder Woman does is she asks, like, "Why are you here? Why did you swear this vow?" Come to find out, this girl had a sister, and this sister had taken off for a film career, and the film career just kind of fizzled out. And so her managers, who were pretty shady at the time, forced her into adult movies. Once her adult film career fizzled out, then they forced her into prostitution. And then when that fizzled out, they killed her. So this girl took off to find her sister, and all this took place in Gotham. And so when she finds the managers and figures out what the managers had done to her sister, she kills the managers. So Batman learns about it, and Batman's chasing the girl. That's why the girl showed up on the doorstep of Wonder Woman. So Batman eventually appears and tells Wonder Woman, like, "Hand the girl over." And Wonder Woman's like, "No," right? Because her life is on the line. If she hands this woman over to Batman, then it's rejecting the vow of Hikatea, and the Fates will kill her. And so Batman's like, "Well, then I'll just take her." Wonder Woman beats the piss out of Batman and throws him out of her apartment. And she's like, "If you come back, I'll kill you." Right? And then, of course, the story kind of unfolds from there. But it's phenomenal, right? The Hikatea is this incredible story with Wonder Woman. A League of One is equally as good. If my memory serves me correctly, so I'm not going to swear by this, but the general gist of the story is that there's like some kind of world serpent or something like that that's supposed to be emerging, and basically Wonder Woman's the only one that can destroy it. But the rest of the Justice League will not stand by while Wonder Woman goes to face off against this thing and potentially lose her life in the process. But because Wonder Woman doesn't want to jeopardize the lives of the League, she beats the crap out of all of them. She incapacitates the entirety of the Justice League so they cannot follow her, and then she goes and fights the Serpent, and then I'm pretty sure she wins. But these are 2 incredible stories that just show how amazing Wonder Woman is in DC Comics. But after that, right, let's go to number 4. Let's go to number 4 on our list, talk about the next story that I want to see. Forever Evil. Now, Forever Evil was a great story in, oh my God, it was a great story in DC Comics. So just kind of sidetrack here. Let's talk about something called Earth 3, because that's paramount to understanding Forever Evil. So those of you guys who are familiar with DC Comics, bear with me here for a second while I kind of run over this for the people who are not. When it comes to the multiverse in DC, you got all kinds of different universes. Earth 3 is a universe where everyone and everything is inverted. So all the superheroes are supervillains, and all the villains are heroes. So Lex Luthor in Earth 3 is a good guy. Someone like Alfred Pennyworth is a dick, and he's really a bad guy here. And so what ends up happening in Forever Evil, which the motivation was actually explained in the lead up to Darkseid War, which, I'll talk about here in a second. And so what goes on here is Earth 3 invades the main DC universe and takes out the Justice League like that. And so it comes down to like Lex Luthor basically bringing together all the villains to defeat Earth 3's crime syndicate, right? Earth 3's version of the Justice League. Now, you end up learning in the lead up to Darkseid War that the whole reason why Earth 3 invaded the main DC universe was not because they were attacking, it's because they were fleeing, because the Anti-Monitor wiped out their entire reality and was killing everybody, right? It was absolutely nuts. But Forever Evil is so dope because it shows what happens when the bad guys have to step in the place of good guys and do good guy things. Of course, it also set Lex Luthor on the path to becoming the hero that he was in Action Comics Rebirth, where he legitimately becomes a good guy. And it was a great story. But moving on to number 3, right? Moving on to number 3 on this list, Batman Under the Red Hood. Now, Under the Red Hood is a phenomenal story with the Batman mythos. Oh my God, it is so good. Okay, so let's talk about a character named Jason Todd. So Jason Todd was the second Robin after Dick Grayson. And Jason Todd existed in 2 forms. There is the pre-Crisis on Infinite Earths Jason Todd, then there's the post-Crisis on Infinite Earths Jason Todd. But regardless of how you slice it, he is kind of the Robin that most people didn't like, but they love him as Red Hood. So what ended up happening is DC wrote a story called Death in the Family. Because of how unpopular Jason Todd was, writer Jim Starlin killed him off. Now, there's the whole thing about somebody calling in and fudging the votes and yada, 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 but nonetheless, the fans voted to kill Jason. And so the Joker kidnaps Jason and I believe his mom. He beats the crap out of Jason with a crowbar and then blows him up. And so it's like the first time in the Batman mythos where a Robin legitimately died. And it had like this huge impact on Batman as a character. He became darker, he became more brutal. Well, there is a story called Batman Hush where it looks like Jason Todd returned. It turned out to be Clayface, but Under the Red Hood is when he actually shows back up again. Except now, he's a vigilante. He shows up in the city of Gotham and basically starts taking it to all the villains. He initially takes over the criminal underworld, working his way up the ranks. And Batman and Robin don't know who this guy is. They've never heard of him before. He swoops in like a thief in the night. This guy's like a wind appearing out of nowhere, right? He's just like in one fell swoop, seizing control of the criminal underworld. Eventually, they figure out it's Jason Todd, and it's phenomenal. The encounter between Batman and Jason, but specifically the moment when Batman realizes it's Jason Todd, it's incredible. Like, it's such a phenomenal story. But imagine like that, right? Imagine that whole story of Under the Red Hood with Robert Pattinson's Batman and Matt Reeves directing. It would be amazing. I don't know how you square that circle, right? I mean, the age that Robert Pattinson is as Bruce Wayne in the Matt Reeves films right now, that's about the age of Jason Todd. That's how old he should be, right? So, you know, they were both 12 years old running around as Batman and Robin is the only way to square that circle. So I don't know how you do it. But it would be an amazing adaptation to the Matt Reeves Batman universe. The story's incredible. But that takes us into number 2. Right now, number 2, this one's going to require a little bit of explanation. Let's talk about something in DC Comics called the emotional spectrum. So most all of you guys know about the Green Lantern, right? Hal Jordan running around with the Green Lantern ring. One of the funny little things that I do want to include here when it comes to the Superman film is Guy Gardner's in that movie. Now, what's interesting about Guy Gardner is that he was supposed to be the Green Lantern before Hal Jordan, but the ring chose Hal over Guy Gardner. And so I think the order, the way it went is you got Hal Jordan as the Green Lantern, then you got John Stewart, and then you get Guy Gardner, and then you get Kyle Rayner. But I always get it confused on who came first between John Stewart and Guy Gardner. But I'm pretty sure it was John that came after Hal Jordan. But nonetheless, right? In DC Comics, one of the things that writer Jeff Johns had done is that he had massively expanded the Green Lantern mythos to say that Green Lanterns don't just indiscriminately get their powers. That what the Guardians of the Universe had done is that in creating the Green Lantern Central Power Battery, where all the Green Lanterns get their power, that taps directly into the emotional spectrum aspect of willpower. But there's other emotions as well. There's rage, there's hope, there's love, there's envy, there's fear, right? All that kind of stuff. And that there is a Lantern Corps for each one of these aspects of the emotional spectrum. And so with all that out of the way, let's get into number 2, the Sinestro Core War. So the Sinestro Core War, for most everyone who was a fan of Green Lantern is like, that's the story. The only other story beyond that is number one, the one that potentially I'm going to pick. It's actually two potential stories for number one. But most Green Lantern fans are like, Sinestro Core War is great. So the idea is that most of you guys know of Thal Sinestro. He was played by Mark Strong, I believe, in that Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern film that was terrible. Well, the idea behind Thal Sinestro is that he was at one point a Green Lantern. What ended up happening is that he effectively abused the power of the Green Lantern role that he played for his sector, that instead of being a protector of his sector, he actually seized control and started ruling it. Eventually, the Guardians found out about it, and he was exiled from the Green Lantern Corps. What he ended up doing was basically forming his own corps called the Sinestro Core, which tapped into fear, because the mentality of Sinestro is that fear is the most powerful of all the emotions that exist out there. With enough fear, you can make anyone do anything. Now, the cool thing about Sinestro Core War, and I won't go wildly into it because we do have a Green Lantern playlist that covers, I think, everything up to the New 52, which we need to finish. We started that like 4 years ago and just never got around to finishing it. The Green Lantern Corps in DC had historically been a peacekeeping force, which means that there was never any lethal force that was authorized for the Green Lanterns. Well, eventually the Sinestro Core War pops off, where Sinestro and his Yellow Lanterns started campaign across the universe, killing every Green Lantern they can find. Every one of them. And there's like no quarter given, right? There's none of that stuff. They find them, they kill them, done. And the whole idea is because Sinestro just wants to get his revenge on the Green Lanterns. Well, the power of the Green Lanterns and the rules they follow, right, the way the rings are programmed, follows something called the Book of Oa, written by the Guardians of the Universe. Well, the way this works is that the Guardians rewrote the laws in the Book of Oa, and there's this amazing moment in Sinestro Core War where like the Green Lanterns are on the ropes, there aren't a whole lot of them left, they're trying to figure out what to do, the best they can do is run and hide, and then all their rings start chiming in, and it's like lethal force is now authorized, and the entirety of the war shifts in favor of the Green Lanterns like that, and it's amazing. Dude, Sinestro Core War was such a phenomenal story. There's like Superboy Prime, the Anti-Monitor. I mean, it's an incredible story. Oh my God, like imagine adapting that to the DC cinematic universe. Son. It would be incredible. Like imagine the fight that you saw at the end of Avengers Endgame with like all the superheroes facing off against Thanos. But imagine like all those Dark Riders that the superheroes are fighting are Yellow Lanterns. And all the normal Avengers superhero guys, the ones that are fighting on behalf of like the good side, they're all Green Lanterns. And imagine those fights are happening all over the universe. That's how big Sinestro Core War was. It was phenomenal. But that takes us into number one. And number one, as I said, is two different stories. So the first story that I would pick here has to be Kingdom Come. How do you not include Kingdom Come in a list of stories that DC needs to adapt to their cinematic universe? So Kingdom Come was literally a superhero civil war in the DC universe. Now, the way this worked out, it was an alternate reality story, right? But the way this worked out was that the Joker just went to Metropolis and massacred everybody in the Daily Planet. Lois Lane, Perry White, Jimmy Olsen, the whole 9 yards. And so he's put on trial. Superman's doing everything he can to hold himself back from killing this guy, but the Joker's put on trial. And Superman has faith in the justice system. Well, in the middle of all of this, and because of the amount of anger that people feel about what the Joker had done, that there's this vigilante superhero named Magog who shows up and kills Joker like that, like kills him on the spot. And so like all of society cheers. Superman is totally disheartened by what he's seeing and abandons his role as a superhero. And because Superman is kind of like the archetype, right? The guy who pretty much all other superheroes look up to for guidance, that what happens is all you have remaining is what society wanted, which is vigilante superheroes. Society cheered vigilantes, now they get to have vigilantes, and all the consequences that come along with it. But the reality here is that because there's no one to guide these guys, it's like feral children just running around in the world doing all kinds of different stuff. Heroes are fighting villains, there's all kinds of collateral damage, people are being killed all the time, and humanity starts to regret the choice that it made. And there's this point where Wonder Woman goes to Superman and is like, you should do something. And Superman's like, no, I'm not going to. They made that choice. They get to live with that choice. And there's this great moment where Wonder Woman's like, you cannot keep punishing them like this. And so eventually Superman returns. And that's when this great big huge civil war pops off. The old guard of superheroes, right? So like Batman, who's old and gray, using like, machine prosthetics to basically move around. What I think it is Wally West, who's the Flash, who just perpetually runs around in a city and like never slows down. Alan Scott, the Green Lantern, just like orbits Earth in a Green Lantern satellite, just waiting for a threat that will probably never come. Well, Superman kind of brings them all back together, right? Like it's the old guard finally returning against the new generation of superheroes. And that's really where the story gets good, because there's a point where I think, is it the Atom, I believe it is, who's like torn open, and it's like this massive nuclear explosion that just like eradicates pretty much the Midwest. Superman and his guys are forced to build like a super prison, and they're kind of forced to walk these morally ambiguous lines of, are they becoming as bad as the vigilantes? It's an incredible story. It's written by Mark Waid, it's drawn by Alex Ross, and it looks incredible. It is one of the most popular stories that DC's ever written about the Justice League. But the next story is also a Green Lantern story-ish, kind of. This is a story called Blackest Knight. And Blackest Knight, I know there's a lot of people who are just like, sure, yes, son. Blackest Knight. Blackest Knight is an incredible story. It's a phenomenal story, but it builds on something called the Blackest Knight prophecy. So throughout the entirety of Geoff Johns' run, starting with Green Lantern Rebirth, which is when Hal Jordan returns to the DC landscape and retakes his role as the Green Lantern, running all the way through like the Rage of the Red Lanterns, introduction of Atrocitus, the Sinestro Core War, all that kind of stuff, is this ongoing prophecy that there's the prophecy of the Blackest Knight. Well, what you end up doing is you learn about something called the Black Hand, this guy who is in effect working with the wildly powerful cosmic entity, may or may not be the representation of death, Necron. And that what Necron does is he represents death on the emotional spectrum, the absence of life. Well, he starts creating all these Black Lanterns, but the difference is that the Black Lanterns, because Necron represents death, are all deceased superheroes. So basically, every superhero that had ever died in the history of DC Comics returns as a Black Lantern, and they just go to war against the entirety of the DC universe on Earth. It's amazing. Now, what followed Blackest Knight was a story called Brightest Day, and so it was kind of like the other half of the coin. If Blackest Knight is a story where the Black Lanterns resurrect every single superhero who died, then Brightest Day introduces the White Lanterns of Life, which Kyle Rayner ultimately becomes, and then becomes Space Jesus after mastering all the lantern rings that are out there. Well, what the White Lanterns do during Brightest Day is they give rings to a select number of the Black Lanterns who are out there, which restores them. So in effect, between these two stories, DC was like, we're bringing everybody back, and then we're only going to keep a few. Everybody else, goes back to being dead, right? And that's effectively it. It was a way to kind of end run resurrecting a whole bunch of dead superheroes that fans wanted to see return. But Blackest Knight is really cool. It's a horror story to a degree, right? It's a pretty dark story. So if DC were going to adapt this, they would have to adapt it around like Halloween or something along those lines. But basically, everything that Geoff Johns had worked on with Green Lantern led up to that point. So the introduction of the Blue Lanterns of Hope, the Red Lanterns, the Indigo Tribe, the Star Sapphires of Love, all those characters, they all play some kind of a role in the story of Blackest Knight. So it's not really one that you could just kind of do on its own. You'd have to do a fair bit of lead up to it if you were going to do it properly. I'm sure it could be adapted in a way that just kind of makes it work for the DC cinematic universe, but I digress. At this point, we're rambling. Let me know if you guys agree with this list, or let me know if there's any other story that I left off here that you would want to see. Yeah, thank you all for watching. I'm excited for Superman. I will catch you all later. Peace.